So the two sources of energy could be light, that could be one source, and what is the other? Typically what is the other one? So light could be one source, and what? So we are not talking about the source of carbon, we are just talking about the energy. So light could be one source of energy. What could be the other source of energy? So no, chemosynthesis. So what is chemosynthesis? Exactly. So when there is a reaction that is going from A to B, that energy that is released, that is chemosynthesis. The energy that is trapped in chemical reactions. Now heat till now, and what the similarity between these two, between so source of energy, both these involve, there is a common factor between photosynthesis and chemosynthesis. The organisms that use photons and the organisms that use chemical reactions. What is that common link? Electrons. Both these are electron transfers. This is the key idea that I want you guys to keep in mind. Electron. We do not know any other source of energy. We do not. Both these involve electron transfers. Now, photons is also, you are trying to get that energy from the sun, or basically any other sun. So if you have a phototroph or some organism that can actually use sun energy or photons, they can take that energy from those photons and transfer it to their electrons. So like that is the process. So you're generating energetic electrons. You can use our sun, or theoretically exoplanets might also have some organisms. Any sun, light from any sun can actually be used. Now what they do is they create some pigments in this process. Can you name a pigment? Chlorophyll is one of those pigments that is can be used as a biosignature, if you want to say it that way. Can be used as a biosignature, because it is using that energy to convert. So there is no life in here as of yet, but just the presence of that chlorophyll can give you some idea about possibility of life, because we see that life either requires the photons or needs the chemical reactions. If there are photons, if there is something that is converting, so chlorophyll is one of those pigments that is converting that photon, like the light energy, to chemical energy. So presence of chlorophyll can actually tell us, give us some idea. Okay, so there are many people who are trying to look for chlorophyll or similar pigments in exoplanetary surfaces. Okay, so that is one way. But that too involves taking that energy from the sun and giving that energy to electrons, so like energetic electrons. Similarly for chemical reactions, it's always chemical, like the electrons that are coming out or going in, the electron exchanges, the transfer of electrons, this is the commonality. Now, heat energy. The question now becomes this: can heat energy be used as an energy source for life? Because till now we have no evidence of showing that heat energy can be used. We only have light energy and the chemical energy, and both these involve energetic electrons. If you have to take anything from today's class, just think, when you talk about energy, you're talking about energetic electrons. That's it. That's the entire energy business. Transfer of electrons. So whatever we'll see today, it will be some type of electron transfer. Now heat, can heat be used? Maybe, we don't know. We have not found anything that can actually take that energy and drive its life, or nuclear energy, nuclear fusion, fission, sound energy. We don't know. We have no evidence till now that these can be used. But imagine that if there is a planet in which sound energy can be used, so essentially without light, without chemical energy, if there is a vibration. What is sound? It's a vibration, right? It's a kinetic energy of some sort. So that kinetic energy can be then converted into this life form. That would be great. So like in there, light and chemical energy will not be the only source. Sound energy can also become a source. Okay? Think about these things, because currently there is no other way. It's just energy, like electron transfers. So redox is also about electron transfers, right? And that is the only source of energy. That means the redox processes are the only source of energy. There could be different chemical reactions. There could be hydration, there could be neutralization, there could be dissolution, there could be precipitation. All these reactions can be there. But none of those energy transfers are usable for life. It's only the redox. So when iron loses an electron or gains an electron, that could potentially become a source of energy. For those organisms who are relying on the chemical reactions. But simple dissolution dissolution and all those kinds, they cannot produce. Although when you dissolve something, for example, if you dissolve calcium hydroxide or calcium oxide in water, there's a huge amount of heat that is released, right? But there is a delta H. So not all exothermic reactions will become a source for this. There will be many exothermic reactions. Neutralization is an exothermic reaction. Acid plus base gives a salt. But that energy cannot be used, or we don't know, we have not seen that any of those energies can be actually used. So it's fascinating stuff. So it is always the electron transfer. That's why you will see some microorganisms that are dependent on sulfate, so you might have heard about sulfate reducing bacteria, iron oxidizing bacteria, right? And technically if you find one mineral that can be oxidized, the iron minerals, if you can oxidize, so that iron 2 iron 2 to iron 3, if there is an energy release between that, there could be an organism that can tap into that exothermic reaction. Or the opposite way, iron 3 to iron 2, and you can tap into that. Sulfate to sulfide, sulfide to sulfate, all those kinds of things. Okay, but not anything else. It's always a redox process that actually needs to be the source of that energy. The second is the source of carbon. Now, that source of carbon, and we know that all living beings are like carbon, we are carbon based, right? So carbon based life forms. For our carbon based life forms, we eat carbon based food. We don't eat silicon based food or I don't know, iron based food. So like the main chain is, we cannot do that. You need to eat something which is carbon based. So all your food is carbon based. Right? So any food that you're eating that is not carbon based, or which is not a whole food, I mean, there's no point in that. There's no energy coming to your body through that. So it's all carbon based. Fruits, vegetables, anything that you eat, all of these are carbon based. But there is a difference. Carbon can be food based, so like you can have a complicated starch, potatoes, rice, wheat, all those kinds of things. But carbon is also present as something else on Earth. What is the other source of carbon? carbon. Where is this? What can be the other source of carbon? You cannot eat coal. I mean, we don't know if any of the organisms, we can definitely not eat coal for energy. I mean, you can eat coal, whatever, but for energy, yeah. Carbon dioxide or carbon monoxide or the carbonates, things like that. So inorganic carbon. So this is the divide. Inorganic carbon and organic carbon. So we are based on the organic carbon, right? So we need those. We cannot just take CO2 and convert it into food. We cannot do that. This is called carbon dioxide fixation or carbon fixation, in which you take that CO2 and magically convert it into food. Who does that? Plants can do it. So the source of carbon for plant is what? CO2. And the source for energy for plants is what? Sunlight. And both these terms will be used to define their metabolism. So any organism that takes carbon dioxide and converts it into food is called a autotroph. And the energy that they use, if that is chemical energy, then they will be chemoautotroph. If that is light, then it becomes photoautotrophs. Similarly, there could be 4 different kinds of things. I hope you can see that, right? Photo and chemo, auto and hetero. So what are you? Are you autotroph or heterotroph? What are you? So you are a heterotroph, right? Because you are not taking the carbon dioxide directly. So you are a heterotroph. There is also a thing called mixotroph. The mixotroph, can you imagine what could be a mixotroph? So autotroph is CO2 to organic matter. Heterotroph is like us. We take one type of already organic molecules and then we are converting them and then we are producing the energy. A mixotroph, what will they do? They can do both. So when I have a lot of food available, I will become a heterotroph. But when there is not that much amount of food left, then I can convert and start doing the autotrophic processes. So these kinds of organisms will have a better time surviving in difficult conditions. Because if there is an apocalypse in which you have no food left, no plants, no nothing, then we will not be able to get that sunlight and carbon dioxide and convert it into food. We cannot do that. But those organisms that can actually do it will be able to survive. Now, here is like a diagram that will help you to visualize all these things. So based on the source of energy, you are either dependent on the sunlight or you are dependent on the chemical energy. If you are chemical energy, you become a chemotroph. Otherwise, you become a phototroph, right? And then you are either chemoautotrophs, in which you are taking the chemical energy, but your source of carbon is CO2. In here, you can also have a source of carbon. They are also autotrophs. So anyone who is dependent on CO2 is autotroph. You can see this. The chemo comes from the source of energy, not from the source of carbon. Okay? So this part is source of carbon, this part is source of energy. And you can have 4 and you can have different examples. Okay? Now, for example, if we take the photoautotrophs, this is everything that is we see as plants. So like anything that is doing photosynthesis for us. And what is oxygenic photosynthesis? What is genic means? What is gen or genus? This generating. So what could be oxygenic? Oxygen producers. So in this photosynthesis, there could be some oxygenic photosynthesis in which oxygen is a byproduct. Oxygen is not the main product of photosynthesis. This is the byproduct. So the main idea for the plants is not to produce oxygen. They don't care. They won't. So they took carbon dioxide, they took CO2, they did magic in their cells, and they produced glucose, or the food that we eat. Oxygen, they don't need it. So where is that oxygen coming from?
The water.
They also need water for that photosynthesis. So that water is being kicked out, that water is being oxidized to form oxygen, and carbon dioxide is reduced to form the food. So there is also a redox process going on there. Water oxidized, CO2 reduced. The oxygen is the byproduct. And we use that oxygen to do something, and we'll see what we use that oxygen for. But this is easy, oxygen. This is not easy, I mean it's common. You can appreciate that. But you can also appreciate that there could be anoxygenic photosynthetic bacteria, because oxygenic photosynthesis is not a requirement of photosynthesis. It's a byproduct. So there could be some microorganisms who will take CO2, who will take sunlight, but in their mechanism they will not produce the oxygen. They will still remain photoautotrophs, but the process will be anoxygenic photosynthesis. No oxygen is produced. So green sulfur and purple sulfur bacteria become they get involved in they do anoxygenic photosynthesis. Plants with chlorophyll, they typically, during the sunlight, when you give it sunlight, it does oxygenic photosynthesis. During the night, they don't, because there is no sunlight. So during the night, they are not going to give away a lot of oxygen, or any oxygen for that matter. Right? Okay. Now, photoheterotrophs, they are relying on this light energy, but they are not taking that carbon dioxide. So some of these bacteria will not depend on the CO2. So they are not doing photosynthesis. They are relying on some already converted CO2 that has already been converted into some amount of quote unquote food, right? Sugar, those kinds of molecules. Okay, chemoautotrophs. So the chemo part comes from the energy source. So they are using the chemical energy. And the autotrophs is they are converting this. Similarly for the chemoheterotrophs, we are chemoheterotrophs, right? There could be two different kinds of chemoheterotrophs. So let's look into this, electron acceptor oxygen. So we are not using sunlight. We are using the chemical energy that is stored in the food. That is one thing. So you got that sugar. So you got that sugar. You are not. The heterotrophs, you are not using the CO2. You already got the carbon. So that is the heterotroph. And the chemo part is in that reaction that we are trying to convert. Okay. Now, you need an electron acceptor. We need an electron acceptor to do this process. Because ultimately, what you are trying to do, your food so the food you are using is an electron source. Just think about that. You just need electrons. That's it. It happens to be that our electrons is coming through this chemoheterotroph, that thing, right? Now, you need an electron source. You also need an electron sink that will help you to get those electrons. You take those electrons and you don't have any electron sink, the electrons are not going to come to you. Oxygen is that electron sink. That is why we need oxygen. So we cannot survive without oxygen. Why? Because that electrons that we need for energy cannot go to anything else. So oxygen will serve as the sink of those electrons. So that is why the electron acceptor is the oxygen. We are all these. But you just need an electron sink, right? That electron sink could be anything. It happens, oxygen happens to be our electron sink. But say if there is something that can actually use chlorine as their electron sink, they will be fine without the oxygen or any other electron sink. Many organisms actually do this. The electron acceptor is not oxygen. They can still survive. They are chemoheterotrophs. Bear in mind, they are chemoheterotrophs, but they do not need oxygen like us. Clear? This is a very good diagram. I have never seen this diagram anywhere. So like Charles' book is the only place that I've actually seen this. I think this is great for us to actually visualize these things and the processes. Now, the energy for life. We touched upon this in a last class in which ATP or adenosine triphosphate is the seat of all this energy. Whenever we talk about energy, ATP is the thing. Now what is an ATP? What is a building block of an ATP? There is an adenosine. Sorry, there is adenine, which is a purine or a pyrimidine. The nucleobases that we talked about. No, it's a purine. You can see this structure. A pyrimidine has one of these 6-membered ring structure. It has two, a 6 and a 5. So it's a purine. So adenine is a purine. This is attached to, what is this thing? What is this? Ribose. What is it? It's a sugar. So the nucleobase is attached to the sugar. So this is the ribose sugar, right? These two then in turn is attached to the phosphate groups. So this is the adenosine triphosphate, and you can see these 3 phosphates, 1, 2 and 3. So these are 3 phosphate groups that has come together and formed that linkage, and we see those kind of linkages forming a lot, right? In amino acids we were seeing the peptide linkage. In sugar we were seeing the glycosidic linkage. In here you can see the ester bond forming. That is also a linkage. In between these, it's a slightly different linkage. It's not the same as these, right? So these are the phosphide groups, and we call them as the anhydride linkages. What is happening is, are all these phosphate groups, H3PO4, they're coming together and water is being removed. That's what is happening. There are all these phosphate groups coming and water is being removed. This is a highly energetic bond, the phosphate bond, more than these ester bonds. This is a highly energetic bond. Because of this highly energetic bond, if you can break those bonds, you will release a lot of energy. That's the key idea for these ATPs. So if you break this bond, you will be able to release energy. And how do you break this bond? React with water. So you hydrolyze that. You hydrolyze this ATP. So ATP, when it hydrolyzes, the phosphate bond breaks and it gives anywhere between 28 to 34 kilojoules per mole of energy. Now, exact energies will depend on, the exact amount of energy will be dependent on the reaction conditions, how much water and blah, blah, blah. But it's a complicated process, but simplistically, water breaking this bond, the energy that is released, that is what you need. So if you break one bond, what will happen? The ATP will become ADP, and you can see that here. So there was this energy stored in that bond. You broke that bond using hydrolysis, water. This one phosphate group, the inorganic phosphate, is released here, and what you get is adenosine diphosphate. Now di means 2, because there are 2 phosphate groups, and this is the inorganic phosphate. Now this is called as PI. This is being represented as this PI, inorganic phosphate. And then you can think of Again, it can be converted to ATP, right? This is storing energy and this is consuming energy. Now, there are different other molecules that can also store energy. Can you give me an example that stores energy? Lipids. That also stores energy, right? This is slightly different because ATP or this structure is involved in multiple types of things in life. This is also related to the RNA. So, how is it related? So, imagine this ADP is losing another molecule of another phosphate group. What will it become? What will be the name of that? So, adenosine triphosphate, adenosine diphosphate, and then monophosphate. And how would you name that? AMP. That AMP is an ingredient of RNA. Adenosine monophosphate. So in here you can see that this energy business is also connected to the data storing business that is happening in, or information storing business that is happening in these nucleic acids. This is a great connect, right? A lipid will not have this connect, but ATP will have this connection in between energy storing and information storing, both. Right? So that's why it also becomes important. The process in which this ADP is regenerated to ATP, this is called phosphorylation. So generating the ATP from that ADP, that is called phosphorylation. Okay, now as I said before, this to this is going to release energy, but this process is not, this process involves an activation energy barrier. So there is an activation energy that requires to get ATP to ADP. It is not very casual, otherwise there will be just a free flow of energy from all the time. That doesn't happen. So there requires an activation energy. Okay, now let's look into a process called chemiosmosis. What time is it? 32? Okay, good. So let's look into the process called an electron transport chain. What is the main thing that we are learning from our study here? Is everything is electron transport, and the talk or the discussion about energy is the discussion about electron transfer. And in electron transfer you will also see, so electron or the absence of electron both will play an important role. So H plus is what? Proton. Why is it a proton? Because it is a proton. It doesn't have a neutron, it doesn't have an electron. So an electron exchange is also related to the proton exchange. So you will also see H plus movement and E minus movement, both are kind of interrelated, or like this other half of the equation you will see. And H plus is also a seat of what? Is also related to another chemical thing, H plus, acidity. So H plus is the seat of acidity. H plus is also related to the electron transfers and all that. So you will see H plus becoming really important in all this business. So it will not only drive the acidity, it will also drive energy transport. So that's why, because we see energy transfers as electron and H plus is the lack of electrons. So if H plus moves from one place to the other, we can theoretically say that the electron is moving in the opposite direction. Correct? So that is why H plus becomes important, because it has both these effects. It has acidity effect, it has electronic effect. Now we will see something called a proton-motive force, or PMF, and that will have two components to it. One is the chemical component and the other is